I get the opportunity to cross paths with a lot of different types of activists. And today I'm speaking with Erin Louis. Hi, Erin. Thanks for joining me.
Hello.
So you've got a book out. I saw that. Did you get a review by Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller? Did I read that right?
I have a rating.
A rating.
On Goodreads. I think it takes a few days for reviews to show up, so I'm not sure if there's a review that's corresponding, but I'll take the rating and run with it.
We have a lot of mutual friends. I saw that David Fitzgerald had spoken about your book. You're a friend of Judy Saint, who is one of my favorite people. She helped host an event of mine in California, and I just fell in love with her. She's just a precious human being. And so I guess this is a kind of serendipitous convergence here. We're all just finally getting the chance to have a conversation. Real fast, can you kind of tell me about the book, what it's about, what your angle is? I mean, give me a primer on it real fast, if you would.
Well, it was absolutely Judy's concept, so I consider her my muse and my mentor. And also one of my all-time favorite people. I met her at a Freedom from Religion Foundation convention, and I told her about a previous book I wrote about my time as a dancer, an exotic dancer, and we kind of came up with the idea of talking about risk-taking and critical thinking, debunking pseudoscience and things like that, but from a little bit of a different perspective. So basically, I use stories from my time in the adult industry to illustrate some of those concepts. So not necessarily anything new, but from a little bit of a different slant. My goal was to maybe reach people that might not otherwise be interested in such topics.
I saw in the description it said the book is a cross between 50 Shades of Grey and the God Delusion. These are two genres I never thought would collide. I just never thought that would happen. I guess I'll start with the elephant in the room. You've spent, as I understand it, 2 decades in the adult industry. Is that right?
Yeah, it sounds worse when you put it that way.
I don't mean to make it sound worse.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I think I'm trying to say that you
didn't start counting my life in decades.
You didn't start last week.
For me.
Okay.
I started dancing in 1997 when I was 18. And I quit shortly before Expose Yourself came out in 2019. There were some breaks in between there, though.
So I've got to ask this question, and I ask it from a position of really ignorance, like I'm an outsider looking in. There are 2 camps in regard to what you do, and I know you've had this conversation, right? You can see this train coming, what I'm about to ask you, but I want you to speak to it. You got one camp who says, good for you. She's a sexually liberated woman who's working in a legitimate industry. She's feeding her family and perhaps doing what she loves. I mean, whatever. Good for her, right? And then there's the other camp that says this is objectification. She's making things harder for women. She's actually propagating this notion that women are things to be gawked at and pawed at. So, I mean, start there. How would you address those concerns or questions?
Well, I think that it's an issue that really requires a bit of nuance because there's a little bit of both. I put myself in a position to be objectified, so I knew what I was doing going in there. I did find it to be very empowering. I found actually the mainstream workforce, at least my very limited experience in it from about 16 to 18, to be exploitive in itself, where, I was basically being used anyway. And I enjoyed the performance of it. I enjoyed the interaction of it. There's a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions, not only about the dancers or entertainers, but also about the types of customers that come in. The creepy old dude in the trench coat is really not the norm. It's a lot of really normal men, and there's a lot of really respectful and kind interactions. But there's a dark side, and the dark side is unfortunately probably still the majority, although I do think it's changing. It is very easy to fall into a lot of traps. So there's definitely a lot of people out there looking to take advantage of young girls and women, and they definitely exploit the naivety as opposed to the actual sexuality. I think my real position on it is that sex and sexuality is something that we all have. It's something that the vast majority of us enjoy in one form or another. Women, I guess, as the fairer sex, tend to err on the side of where we're looked at as being the more sexual of the sexes, I think. So like I said, I think that there is a way to make it where it's safer for women to do it. We're certainly not going to make this kind of thing go away. Prostitution will never end. It will never stop, but we can definitely make it safer for everybody involved.
Do you come out of a repression culture where things were inhibited, fundy religion, that kind of thing?
I have 5 brothers and sisters. They were raised Catholic. I'm 9 to 14 years away from all of my siblings. So they were raised in more of a fundamentalist Catholic environment. Whereas by the time I came along, after my brother was born, all of a sudden birth control was okay. And then I was an accident after that whole thing. So a lot of that real strict religion was pretty much out of my life. It was really, there was just kind of the bare bones left. So like I went to church very rarely. I wasn't super popular in Sunday school because I asked a lot of really annoying questions. I was called, talkative and precocious. So like I was baptized, but that was as far as I went. I was still raised with the ideas of, women, you get married and you have kids and you don't work on cars and you don't mow the lawns. You basically clean the house and do all that kind of stuff. So I was raised with a lot of those types of concepts. But I don't know that I really necessarily felt like I had to act out against them because it was pretty soft.
Yeah, so that was my first thought was, hey, this is just a fuck you to your former faith. That's hopefully not an insulting question, but a lot of people who come out of a fundy repression culture, they're like, I'll show you my liberated self, and that's what they do, For me, honestly, what felt oppressive was my job, was, going from working in McDonald's, which is ridiculous, and working in an office, clerical type stuff. I worked on the phone, being stuck in a cubicle, the 9 to 5 kind of thing. It was that I found oppressive, that I was really kind of stifled, and I didn't really see. I graduated high school early. And I started at a community college doing just my general ed because I didn't know what I was supposed to, I wanted to be a lawyer, actually. So if you ever wonder why I fawn over Andrew Slidell, that's kind of why. But, it was something that was never really encouraged. It was like education almost felt like a pipe dream in, I guess, my family. And then once I started dancing, my college fund kind of dematerialized. My father didn't want to pay for it anymore. Yeah, it's probably the next natural question to me is, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm going to work. How does that go over when you're a stripper?
Well, I was a waitress for about a month. So that's kind of what I used. And then eventually I just thought, this is stupid. I'm not gonna lie anymore. My mom was real easy. My parents were divorced, so my mom was real easy. She was raised extremely strict Catholic. So getting back to your original point, I think my dancing might have been a bit of a fuck you for her, kind of by proxy. So she was kind of proud about it. She actually tottered around in my heels one time, which was about the cutest thing in the whole world. My dad obviously had a bit of an issue with it. So did my brothers. My brothers were more about my safety, at least to my face. I'm sure they expressed other opinions behind my back. Actually, I know they did, but I'll let that go. When my dad realized that I was no longer going to be asking him for money. If I got low, all of a sudden he was a little more supportive, because he viewed it from a financial standpoint, and that seemed to be soothing to him.
When you talk about things like fearing for your safety, I mean, it does raise natural concern. Like a guy like me is just like, is this an unsafe? Are you unsafe? Is it indictment rather of the men who are coming to see you, or at least, a high percentage of those men? You understand how I look at this and I think, wow, I'm not even sure what to do with that. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. And that goes back to some of the misconceptions, because it isn't just the strippers and the entertainers that have those kinds of stereotypes. The guys that come in are very, very normal. I would say 90%. Have I met some scary dudes? I have. The Golden State Killer actually was somebody that used to come in day shifts very shortly before he was arrested, if you've heard that story, which is horrid. It's possible I met him. If I did, I probably don't remember. I didn't really work day shifts. I know some of my security has. But as far as the strip clubs go, and it's pretty standard, it might be different in other places. Places vary. But, we're on camera. I've never worked at a club from low end to high end where I have walked out by myself, ever. I've never felt unsafe while I was in the club. Maybe the one or two times where I felt like I might have been in fear or in danger, I felt like somebody might get out of hand. Usually there's alcohol involved. There was somebody right there for me. So I never felt unsafe that way. Did I have those same ideas when I first started dancing? Definitely. It was definitely a concern. But a lot of that type of entertainment, you really get to know the person that you're dancing for. The vast majority of the time, they're just normal guys, or they're lonely, or they're, sometimes they have stuff they want to get off their chest that they don't want to tell their family, or, they're looking for somebody that is more anonymous. And like I said, the vast majority of guys are just very normal, lonely, or bored, or, things like that.
Okay. Well, I mean, you speak candidly in your book about all this stuff, so I figured the questions that I ask would speak to that. I hope no one thinks I'm trying to be salacious or overtly provocative. I'm not, peeling back any layers of the onion that you have not already done. In fact, the book's called Expose Yourself, and you do that very thing. Tell me about, do you ever have people walk in who just proclaim that God has made them your destiny kind of thing? Like, I don't know why, but my first thought was, all right, fine. There's got to be people who walk in and go, the Lord told me that I was supposed to be here and that you and I would be together forever. Has that ever happened to you? Because I got to know.
I have not gotten that in particular. I try to be very, always try to be very careful about, because obviously I'm selling a fantasy. I'm perpetuating an illusion. That's the point. That's why I'm there. But I was always very sensitive to guys that were looking for a soulmate or things like that. And so I never wanted to exploit their feelings in that way. That does happen in the strip club. It was something that was kind of a boundary for me. That being said, lots more, I would say, zodiac type stuff. Oh, you're a Scorpio. I'm a whatever. We're meant to be together. And, usually try to tamp that down. I had one, actually, there's a chapter called God Told Me to Touch Your Pussy, which is a guy that kept trying to touch me and was telling me that God had actually told him to do that. So I would say, as far as being directed by God per se, that's the only incident that I can think of. But yeah, most of the time when they talk about like fate and things like that, it's framed more in a spiritual type thing, like astrology or,
You've
soulmates.
got some stories, is what you're telling me. You got stories.
A few, one or two, yeah.
I'm interested. It's funny when we talk about sexual liberation and the woman. It's like the myth of Lilith, who was the precursor to Eve in the Garden of Eden. And Lilith was this sexually adventurous, totally liberated character. And this is actually part of some flavors of Christian tradition. Obviously, it's not in the book of Genesis. But as the legend goes, Lilith was just too much. She was too assertive. She was too much like the male should have been. And so God said, you're out of here, and actually started over with the more demure and submissive Eve. And I thought that was an interesting commentary. It's actually a great reflection on how fundy Christianity likes to think about women, right? Women are there essentially to serve the men. You ever read The Transformed Wife on Twitter? You ever see those tweets? Because it'll make you die inside. Something.
Just a little, and actually that's why I just kind of avoid it, because I really thought, it's funny because when I first saw that, the same thing with Ray Comfort, I thought it was fake. I thought there's no way that this is real. And I actually asked my son, who was much more well-versed in social media before me, I was like, this woman's not real. And he goes, oh no, she is. I was like, really?
For those who aren't aware of what we're talking about, for a common frame of reference, she is the kind of person who would tweet that, a woman needs to be properly ready for her husband as he comes home from a hard day, and have that hot food on the table and be ready to please him in whatever way he needs, because he's the man with needs. And your role is to pretty much be a slave is about the best word I've got, Erin. Just serve your man, because the Lord has designated you the servant in this relationship. And I threw up a little bit in my mouth every time I see, one of those tweets roll out. This is just an aside. Do you get performance reviews in your profession? Do they have an evaluation? Hey, Erin, it's time for your 6-month eval. Well, how's that even done? Is everybody just kind of do their own thing? Forgive this abstract question, but what? Well,
because we're independent contractors, that really puts a damper on that kind of stuff. There's actually very little that they can really regulate. And so there's no real, if they start getting like customer complaints or things like that, then, something like that might be brought up. But even then, most dancers pay the club to work there. So it's really in the club owners and staff to make us happy. So our servants, if you will.
I see.
I still consider like my bouncers and my security, my guys, they're my boys, which is probably kind of insulting, I guess.
No, it's kind of a Baton of Power thing. I mean, it's
but it is. The whole reason that people are coming in there is because of the entertainers and the dancers. So there may be times where if and this is going to sound terrible, and I'm going to defend it right after I say it, but if you put on weight after you were hired, somebody might say something. They might restrict your shifts and be like, well, you can only work a certain shift until either you lose the weight or this is that, because you're not appealing to what we're here for. And I actually, when I was working in Vegas, I had a girl come up to me and she was really upset because she just had the same conversation with the manager. And I was kind. I tried to be kind, but if you are an entertainer and you're hired for your looks, you do have a certain obligation to maintain those looks. And there are consequences for not doing that. You signed a contract, and maybe had you been, now some of those like real restrictive requirements are gone. There's a lot more diversity in like body type and things like that. So this may not be so much of an issue anymore, but that's really the only time that you're going to get kind of critiques. But I also think that is something that you literally agreed on and signed up for if you're going to enter this kind of work.
Because there are such high standards for, this sort of performance, do you feel like that leads to unrealistic expectations for women who are not performers in that way?
I think it definitely can. Yeah, I don't see how you couldn't. If you're not a performer or whatever, I think that would be one of the issues, or one of the criticisms of the industry, is the fact that it does perpetuate those standards that can be hard to maintain. I've struggled with it myself, a lot. It's hard to, be hungry all the time. but it's not really unlike athletes or professional dancers. Sometimes I shy away from calling strippers dancers because it really is not altogether a essential component of the performance. You know, I'm not a ballet dancer. I've never been trained in anything. I, danced to Slayer. So it's not really that thing, but no, definitely. And right before I quit, though, like I said, there started to be a much larger spectrum of body types in particular. And so I think that strict, like skinny type look is not necessarily really required anymore. So I'm hoping that that's starting to ease a little bit. I know that I had a customer once comment that I had been too skinny. So
you never know, right? You never know what's going to do it for people. I certainly do see in the culture that we are broadening the tent and realizing the beauty comes in so many forms and not just what's airbrushed on the magazine covers, those totally unrealistic expectations. I'm sure you can continue to speak to that more than I can. Hell, I haven't seen myself naked since the 80s. I just wouldn't do that. I can't bear the thought of it. The book is called Expose Yourself, How to Take Risks, Question Everything, and Find Yourself, Humor and Insights from My Life as a Stripper. Why religion? Like, why use your experiences? You said in the book that you feel like you're kind of a sociologist. You've had a chance to observe people. You got a vantage, a literal vantage, where you're able to watch people for, years and years of your career. But why religion? Why translate that into this particular discussion?
Well, the book came about after I met the contributing editor, Judy Saint, at the convention for Freedom from Religion Foundation, actually in San Francisco. And I had become involved with, the atheist movement or community a few years before that. But when I really actually became active is when I had an issue with my son's school. And a church group was basically trying to bribe literally the entire school with free bikes to go to their event. And the school was promoting it. I had been following FFRF for a while. And I messaged them and say, what do I do? How do I help this? And they sent a letter to the district. We were able to get them to stop promoting the school. And then I became a member of FFRF. And when I met Judy and told her about my experiences as a dancer, actually, one of the first things she said was, how fast can you write a book? And so she really helped me come up with a lot of the chapter names and titles and concepts in that way. So it was never, I guess I was kind of an inadvertent activist. It was never really my intention. It was really kind of mama bear. And I was annoyed that my kid was going to be turning down a free bike, which he didn't need. But it caused some friction at school, and I wasn't going to let it go.
The book is about being yourself, being your authentic self, about taking risks. A lot of talk about risks in the book. And I think, maybe this leans back into the repression culture thing that I was mentioning before. But, your whole shtick is, hey, carpe diem, right? I mean, seize the day. Would that be accurate?
I would say so, yes. I think as I lost my concept of God and the afterlife and things like that, it really kind of hit me that it is really important to not waste any time on things that just don't matter, that don't serve you, that don't make you happy, that don't contribute, to the world.
How you doing these days? I mean, you happy?
I would say I'm pretty happy. I've had some books out, which is kind of crazy. I had always, in addition to being a lawyer, I would say what I really, really always wanted to be was a writer. And I kind of feel like I got there, which is still mind blowing for me. I have a co-authored fiction novel coming out next year. It is a little strippery in nature, but it's a crime novel.
Strippery as an adjective is a great word. Strippery. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Maybe I'll get to
strippery. So, I mean, but when you're writing, I've done a few books. Do you find that you're not just creating, but you're also discovering at the same time? Do you have that experience? It's like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm actually, my very first book, Dirty Money, came out in 2015, and that is actually going to be republished later this year. A publisher has picked it up, and I'm in the middle of rewriting it. And it was my first real attempt. It was something that I kind of put out there. I self-published it, and I thought, well, there you go. I did it. Scratch that off my bucket list. That's the end of it. And as I go through and I see my progression as a writer, I see where I was, and I see where I am now. And not only that, but going through my experiences that I recorded and things like that, I definitely see the self-discovery kind of unfold in like real time. And it's enlightening.
That's pretty cool. I mean, this is, I always say you live your life in chapters. We talk about this chapter, that chapter, and you've come into this specific chapter where you're able to build upon your experiences. You're writing about those experiences and the attempt to try to reach and encourage other people to perhaps do the same. The book is called Expose Yourself, How to Take Risks, Question Everything, and Find Yourself, Humor and Insights from My Life as a Stripper. And I'll include that link in the description box. All my best and all success with the book. Thanks for chatting with us, Erin. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having me. It was nice meeting you.